everyone, and welcome to Burn the Ship, the podcast that helps entrepreneurs go all in on their business, and we introduce them to professionals that can help them to do so. Today, we have a very special guest. Brian, how are you doing today?
Doing well.
Excellent, excellent. Brian, please introduce yourself and the name of your business.
Sure. I'm Brian Sullivan. I'm an owner of assisted living locators here in Atlanta, Georgia, and we are a concierge-level senior placement service.
Awesome, awesome. We so look forward to learning more about your business and what you do. But before that, we want to learn a little bit more about your journey, and we understand that time is one of our most valuable resources. So go ahead and jump into it and tell us about your story.
Sure. So, I'm a Boston native, so I'm a damn Yankee.
Okay.
So I'm still living in the South, but moved here about 30 years ago after living in various places around New England. Moved down here for work.
Okay.
Like for opportunities here in Atlanta back in the mid-'90s. And in that time, worked for a number of financial services and banks over the years. Matter of fact, 35 years of my career was dedicated towards technology and operations in banking and financial services.
Okay, awesome. So when you were up north, you were just getting started. You said 30 years. I'm assuming you were just finishing school or just getting going in your career.
Yeah.
What prompted such a big change? Because coming from up north down south is a big difference.
Yeah, it was one of those opportunities to go when you wanted to see what you weren't living in, right?
Okay.
So I lived in different states in New England. I went to college in Vermont, and like I said, born in Boston, raised in Connecticut. So it was an opportunity I couldn't resist, and it was an opportunity to live somewhere else, completely different than where I was, but not too far away, right? Because I'm pretty close to my family, and it's a plane ride, so it made sense.
Not too terribly far.
Yeah.
So was financing and software, were you creating software? Were you doing banking? Tell us a little bit about your positions when you started.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of different things. I mean, it was really, I've always had a concentration in operations. So, and obviously with banking and financial services, operations eventually meant technology too, right? I mean, the two are just, it overlay and it was inseparable. So over time, various things came into things. So how do we operate more efficiently? So I'm a Six Sigma green belt.
Okay.
So learned how to make things more proficient, eliminate variation, right? So that serve our clients better, right? Consistency is key there. But also, how do we leverage technology to do what we need for our clients and provide more services, differentiate ourselves from other, financial services organizations and banks, and really just make the experience better for our clients. So, I mean, it was, ultimately I ended up in a role where I was overseeing other, so in program project management, I held operational roles where it was just focused on implementing new technologies, converting over, making things more efficient. So, I've done pretty much a host of all operations and just different parts, whether it was software development, technology implementation, software implementation, big differences, right? And so kind of run the gamut.
I got you. Yeah. Now, I do want to stop and stay at the Six Sigma for a second, because I know that it's making sure your processes are efficient, making sure things are working a little bit smoother. Over your time in business and working with the different financial institutions, how have you found Six Sigma to help you to find some success?
Well, most folks think, Six Sigma, they think of manufacturing, right? And really, when I went through it, I actually got my green belt with Bank of America. It was about process, right? And every business has process, right? Whether you're thinking large or small business, they're all going to have it. And when it comes down to it, even Six Sigma is about data, right? And so data is, you can't refute data. So working with data really became the basis for helping people understand how process and application of Six Sigma could make their work easier, their roles more efficient, right? Without giving up the role itself, but make them more productive. So there was, there's some convincing in that, simply because manufacturing mindset. But when you show them how you can apply it to service and the work some of us do every day, it really becomes easily adopted.
Yeah. I wanted to ask that because it is mostly manufacturing. Like I said, I have a few friends who have went through the courses and, gotten certified and all those things, but they are in manufacturing or logistics.
Okay.
That's why I wanted to get an idea of how that was working in the financial part.
Well, yeah, but you'll just think about, and you'll understand this, right? Operations in banks and financial services like Logbox.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, massive amounts of paper still coming through the system, right? You're going to understand how to, follow a client's instructions on opening and processing payments, right? You've got to understand when you're taking in the credit cards, we talked PCI compliance a moment ago, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
all those things, and that is where Six Sigma can come in and really make the customer experience best, right? Because they're going to be following the instructions, and we can't have variation.
That's right.
Because that's what Six Sigma is all about. And so, by applying Six Sigma, we really brought more opportunities for our clients to operate better, and we put features and stuff in there that really help them understand that we have the technology to make their experience better and thereby improving customer service.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for sharing that. Whenever I hear that, it always piques my interest because, like I said, I do have a couple friends and people that I work with who went through it and just have raving reviews about it. And I just wanted your input on it. Now, 30 years, you're down here, and how long have you had assisted living?
It's about 18 months now.
18 months. So 30 years, and something was going on where you said, hey, look, this, is coming to an end. Was it where you just said, I'm retired? Was it something where you were laid off? Tell us about that, the end of your corporate situation.
Yeah, good fortune, but also at a point where I recognize that. And, having been in tech and ops for 30 years and having the last part of that really heavily focused on tech, matter of fact, in banking, a large merger that took place in two banks here in Georgia that I worked through for quite a while. I was feeling pretty burnt, frankly, just liked it, but just wasn't feeling the energy I had, for it all the years before. So it was just, kind of plugging along, if I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
But then post-merger, operations start maturing. The bank looked at it and said, that role, we can eliminate that role.
Okay.
So again, good fortune, me feeling like I was at a point where I wanted something different. The opportunity came along, I took it.
Okay.
So it was pretty
just
fortunate.
timing. So it's timing.
Yeah, it's fortunate.
That is good that you were feeling a specific way. The actual process was coming together where after the fact they were going to change up some things. Now at that time you got 30 years of experience and I'm sure inside of that, if you wanted to stay in something similar, wouldn't have been too terrible. You've been a VP, president, CEO somewhere, but you decided to start your own thing. Now was it a specific event that said, hey, you know what, I am not going to retire and just go sailing just yet, but I'm going to start something else. Was there an event that happened that made you say, I'm going to keep going?
I mean, I'm pushing a lawnmower since I was 8 years old, right?
Okay.
So it's ingrained in me to work and earn my way and just be self-sufficient. So it was never a question of just hanging things up, right? It was, what do I want to do next? But in that question is what do I really want to do next? Not what do I have to do?
Yes.
And so I knew a change in direction was necessary. I just didn't know how I was going to get there, right? So, I mean, immediately I was like, I don't want to stay in corporate.
Right.
I've had enough. I've done my run. I think it's been great, but I don't want to stay there. And then I was also thinking, well, I probably don't want to stay in banking. They're very regulated, and there's a lot of peaks and valleys and stuff like that. So I'm like, maybe I just don't want to do that, right? I want to try something different. So then I was left with what?
Yeah.
And I had no clue. So, I traveled around. I did a whole bunch of stuff and took a few months off. And then found a program with the Entrepreneur Source. Which is, hey, you can go back to do what you're doing. You can reposition yourself, maybe start something organically, or look at options to purchase a company and get into a different line of business.
Yes. So that's what you did, huh?
I did. I took that. Yeah, I went through that process.
So was that one is that part of the process where you take a test and try to see where you are and what best fits you? Is that that's the type of program?
Yeah, the upfront part of the program is a lot of self-discovery, right? So, I'm a pretty typical profile for that sort of thing, right? Your 30-year career, and now you're looking for something different. What is that, right? Because your priorities at this point in your life and your career are very different than they were even 5 years before or 10 years before. Because I'm in my late 50s, starting to look at, that, that's magic number out there. What's it going to be?
Right.
You're like, okay, what do you really want to do? And so it was a very Socratic process with self-discovery.
Okay.
What makes me tick, right? What are my priorities at this point in my life? Where do I see myself in 5 years at this point, and what do I want?
Yeah.
Really, what do I want, and how am I going to get there, right? So the process really teaches you with, understanding yourself, and then at that, at a certain point, they say, okay, well, here are the options, right? And which decision do you feel,
best fit you?
Yeah, best fits you. But they help you understand what each opportunity channel would be. Hey, it takes these kind of resources to do that.
Yeah.
This is what it's going to take. This is how you can apply your resources to this to go that direction. So there's a lot of education in that says, hey, you do have resources at your disposal that you might not have envisioned being used in a certain way to go in that direction.
Okay.
So it's really helpful, right?
Yeah.
Because you just don't know what you don't know.
That's a fact. That's a fact. And you're used to what you've been used to for 30 years. It is huge to make a change. That's the thing that I've seen in this industry and even in the other industries I worked in before is the change is the biggest thing. It's not necessarily the product, the service, the rate, the fees. It is I'm used to what I'm used to. And it seems like this evaluation or test that you took kind of got your mind flowing to get out of that mindset of, hey, I'm used to that. Let's try something new.
Absolutely. Yeah. Opened a lot of doors and just said, hey, this is what this is about, and provided a really honest assessment. The pros and cons, this is what you need, this, here are some setbacks or, risks in doing so, really so that you could evaluate, right? And you make a choice, which they ultimately lead you to and say, okay, we're going to ask you to make a choice now. What do you want to do, right? And some people just say, I don't want to be, and the program is designed for, examining whether or not you want to be an entrepreneur. So, you get to a certain point and they say, what do you think you want to do?
Yeah.
Are you interested in learning more about being an entrepreneur or can we help you go back to whatever direction you want? And so they're asking you to make a decision and you make a decision.
Yes. Yeah. And your decision was to be an entrepreneur. And we want to learn about that. And we want you to tell us all about your business and what you chose to do. Share with us what you're doing and how we can best help you. So tell us about your business.
Sure. So it's concierge-level placement for seniors, but also different home care solutions. So at a certain point when seniors need care, right? Not all families can provide that care. They've got, mom and dad both work, kids are off college, whatever. There comes a point where a senior needs more care, right? Just because they're aging and doing whatever they want to do. So what I do is help the families and the individuals sometimes find a solution for themselves. I've actually worked with the individual. They're on their journey to figure out, what they want. But I help them determine the right solution. So it could be independent living. It could be assisted living based on, healthcare needs or support from activities of daily life. It could be, they might be on the dementia spectrum. So I may help find the best memory care community for them. Or in some cases, if they're, pretty far along, it may be a skilled nursing community that best suits the needs of that individual for what they have for healthcare.
Yeah, so it can be the individual person, but it seems like it is going to be the adult children. Tell us a little bit about your experience with working with the adult children, ones that are close, ones that are far, ones that are happy, ones that don't care. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, there is every combination you can think of, right?
Yes.
But it boils down to this. There's a very emotional decision at the core of what we're doing. Okay? So it's important that you can, display, the calmness, keep everybody kind of, focused on the objective here, because there will be a lot of, dynamics coming in, family dynamics, or even individual, like, do I really want to do this, right? So, the family is going to be dealing with its own dynamics and trying to figure things out, but most families will only do this once or twice. Right? As far as making a big decision on senior care for someone else. Right? So it's my calling to provide them with, facts and data that meet the requirements that we're talking about here, right? If somebody's health is in the top concern, which it always is, what are the care needs?
Okay.
Where do you want it, right? Access to your support network is extremely important in the senior years, right? And then, budget is always going to come into play. So those three are kind of the legs with which the stool stands.
Yes.
And you got to understand where they fit for each family because it's going to be different, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So you build, take those requirements and you provide them with, again, data basically, right? And information, but in a way that they can digest, that saves them the effort of going out and pulling all that information in themselves. So it's again efficiency, right?
Yes.
You're showing your value in saying, hey, I know you've been driving by that assisted living community every, for the last 10 years on your way to work. Anybody else might pull in and get pricing and information and all that stuff and realize, oh, this isn't the place for my mom, right?
Yes.
Just from maybe it's budget, it looks nice, let's go in. Oh, that's too much money. So to save families from going to 5 different locations, right? They come to me, I provide that information for them, and literally I can do it in hours.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So, and then also, when you're looking at these communities, it's not just go to one and do that. It's the role I have is really part matchmaker, and part real estate agent.
Oh, okay.
Assisted living communities are not all the same. Okay, some like high acuity residents, others don't. Others are more focused on social interaction, right, and activities. So when you get into independent living, a lot of times folks want to live there because they've got the interaction and they can build relationships with other seniors and take advantage of those years with lots of activities and and live their best life for while they're still independent, right? But so that's it. But you got to know where to find those places, right? Yes. So it's not just me pulling up data. It's the communities I present, I will have a relationship with. I go to them regularly. I volunteer quite a bit at a lot of the communities. Kind of differentiator there, but really in an effort to get to know the community, right?
Yes.
If I go in for an interview, right, I'm going to get a sales pitch, just like you would if you drove off the street, right, to some degree. But my knowledge is going to be a little deeper.
Right.
Sitting in a community doing a volunteer event, like, painting or, flowers, you learn a lot about a community.
Yes.
And you really get to understand this is what this community has to offer, and this is how it would set itself apart from others in, when you go to evaluate things. So again, bringing that knowledge to the family is always very helpful.
Yes.
On the reverse side, when I walk in with a family and a potential resident, the communities know I'm bringing them someone who is going to probably thrive in that community, right? Because they know that I know what they're about, right? And that resident's going to be a good fit. It's how they evaluate with the family, is it the best fit? And I support that decision in any way I can.
Yes.
I go on tours with the family. I schedule them. I tour with them. I've heard the entire story, which is very important, right?
That's right.
Every family has a story. In that story, you hear the dynamics of the family, right? And you hear the individual's history. Right. And so if there's a certain something about that individual that would resonate with the community, you can bet I'm going to point that out, right? Yeah. And so while we're actually in the community, I'll take the time to say, didn't you say that, your father did this? And hey, look, this is their veterans wall, right?
Yes.
Look at your dad's a veteran. So making sure that the family's comfort level comes up and asking questions that they wouldn't know or wouldn't think of to ask themselves, right?
Yes.
So kind of probing, but also pushing the information out.
Yeah, sounds like you're a professional personality matchmaker. The personality of the community, the personality of the possible person going into it, and making sure it's a good fit. So it seems like you cut out a lot of steps for the family in their research and helping them to find it. Now, I know that you're here in Atlanta. Tell us a little bit about the geographical area. How far out do you want to go? Do you take them all over the country? Or do you stay here? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, primarily serve the metro Atlanta area, right? And it's really about marketing yourself and where the business comes from. I can place anywhere in metro Atlanta, Georgia. I have 3 peers in Georgia, so we often share leads, share information if necessary. But it's really about understanding all of metro and understanding the dynamics. Right, there are a lot of dynamics in the city. Primarily, when we think about North Atlanta versus south of the city, lots of different dynamics. And the city, as you know, is changing constantly, right? It never stops changing.
That's right.
And so the dynamics of the city change. And if you're keeping your hand on the pulse or finger on the pulse of that, you recognize that, hey, as a placement advisor, there's a shift to the south right now in Atlanta, right? And investment and, people living. And so that provides opportunities, possibly. Right. So, it's getting people out of that comfort zone and thinking, oh, I want to be in Buckhead, or I want to be in, Ackworth or something like that, and saying, it might be a little too far, but let's examine communities in this adjacent area because there's some price advantages to doing that, and it's great care, right?
Yes.
So introducing that sort of information is our role, right? We've got to do that. But it really does help the family get perspective and say, okay, there are some trade-offs, cost versus convenience or service, right? If there's a specific healthcare need, we have to be very cognizant of that. And not every community would provide the specific care needed. So, hey, we are going to have to go outside of your preferred, geography, but it's the care that's driving that.
Yeah, that's the service that is needed by the parents.
Right, exactly.
So we got to provide that for them. Now, I definitely appreciate you sharing, what it is that you do, who you're looking to get in front of. But one of the things that we do a lot of is networking. So we want to also ask, who are those gate openers? Who are those people who provide opportunities for leads and things like that for we can connect you with?
I mean, it sounds funny to say, but almost anybody can, right? I mean, we all know seniors, right? And we all have interactions with seniors. But really, when it comes to gate openers of sorts, I work with a lot of home care agencies because at a certain point that may become too expensive, and the home care, the family will make a decision to move. But also estate planning attorneys, because they've got a really good eye into what the family's, how it's structured, right, and all that kind of stuff. But then also financial planners, right? What tools does the family have at their disposal to support the senior? They could have a long-term care policy out there. They, whatever it is, I'll help them, understand that. So financial planners rely on us a lot. Estate planning attorneys do as well, just because they know I'm part of the care continuum, right? And based on the profile of the family, I can help find the right community.
Yes.
So they're good. And home care agencies also, just because they, they're in the business as well. Right. They're a different part of the care continuum, but, they know when it's time. So.
I always ask that question because, again, we want to get you to that person who makes a decision, but also finding the person who can send you those opportunities are just important because we are a business and we have to continue to get the opportunities, because when those slow down, the funnel kind of dries up. So I want to try to get those people in front of you too. Now, I definitely appreciate you sharing your journey. Tell us about your business, some of those good referral partners to introduce you to, but I also want to talk about some of those business skills or some of those best practices that you have acquired and nurtured over time that have helped you to be successful. Do you mind sharing with the audience some of those best practices, and maybe they can add it to their mix?
Sure. So, again, kind of focusing on the decision at hand with this, it is emotional. Okay. So, anybody who works in senior care can tell you have to have a big heart. You've got to have compassion for this role and patience. Again, very difficult. So I think, understanding where patients are needed is very important. So applying that appropriately. When it comes to business skills, we talked about, I'd never imagined that my Six Sigma green belt would be so important, but it really is, right? Because you're talking about making a decision process more efficient, right? And bringing the right data to the family at the right time so that they can absorb that, right? Because they're dealing with a lot of things. So again, That's timing, that's patience, understanding those things. Compassion is a big part of that. I think that's a skill that you have outside of corporate sometimes, right? You don't get a chance to really express compassion in a corporate environment.
No, you don't.
No, right? Or not always, but, for the most part.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think those, but also it's communication and transparency. Very much so, simply because, again, there's emotions, there's family dynamics that are always involved in this, right? But being transparent and making sure you're communicating things, you're communicating fact-based information is really critical, right? I mean, it can't be, subjective in a way that's going to, make them think differently, because ultimately that will impact their decision, right? If it's subjective on my part or something of that nature, they're going to be like, wait, that doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Right? So objectivity, transparency, very important. And those obviously were very important as a, in corporate world too, right?
Yes, 100%.
So yeah, I think that's probably the basis.
ones,
But but also knowing when to apply them.
Right.
It's very important too. You can't rush things. You've got to feel what the family's feeling to some degree and know when it's the right time to introduce things.
Yeah, sharpening the soft skills. Sharpening the soft skills.
Exactly. Very much so.
Because like I say, you went from very rigid numbers to, yes, the numbers and being rigid on that part is important, but you have a whole different layer that you're putting on now because you have to be compassionate, be genuine, and the families will see that. So, to all the entrepreneurs that are watching, also work on those soft skills as well. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, we've talked a lot about your journey and your business. I want to talk about, Brian, just a little bit. Let's say that business is coming along well. You're doing such a great job with your concierge service there, placing people, and time and money is not an issue. What is it that Brian would do with his time?
Well, he would be in the Caribbean on on his 60-foot catamaran, probably chartering it out, just out on the water. I mean, it always has been that way, but this would be definitely my next step.
That'll be your next
Absolutely.
thing. Yeah, I saw your tattoo on your arm. I was trying to get an understanding of what it meant. Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, sailing since I was 8 years old. It's just an opportunity to represent who I was. And there were some big decisions made prior to this one, but this represents my initials in sailing ensigns. So BPS.
Nice. So sailing is your thing, I can tell now. Now, how fast have you actually sailed a boat? Is this one of the ones where you make it go super fast, or is this just long term?
Long term. I mean, it's really cruising. I raced when I was a little kid, like Blue Jays and Lasers, which are all one design boats. But then, growing up, we had sailboats and stuff. And even here, I've had a sailboat on Lake Lanier for a few years. So, yeah, I mean, there's always a way to find some wind.
So you're out there doing it big. Okay, well, that's awesome. Definitely appreciate you sharing that. I try to ask these types of questions because I want people to understand it's not just about the business, but there's a purpose, there's a why behind what you're doing. And I love to hear the fact that you got there sailing. Caribbean is going to be a nice weather, beautiful water out there.
For sure.
So I definitely can understand that. Now, Brian, if the people today that are watching have questions about how to get in contact with you when it comes to your journey, those business skills, definitely the business, what's the best way for them to contact you?
So Assisted Living Locators is well known here in Atlanta, and for those asking, you really want to just look me up on the interweb. So it's or call me at 404-934-5174. But understand that locators are a really important part of the process with placement. We can make things a lot easier for you and that process. And Assisted Living Locators has been around for 23 years. So we understand the process and how important it is for helping families through that time.
Awesome. Please reach out to them if you have those needs. And we appreciate you coming on. It's not always easy to share that journey, the ups, downs, all arounds. And we always honor our guest by giving them the last word. So, Brian, please look to the camera and tell the people something good.
I think the more I'm out there, especially in this line of work, the compassion and caring that people who serve seniors have is incredible. Being in corporate, I didn't really understand what it took to support seniors in their their years, their later years. But throughout Georgia, in particular, there's an amazing network of caregivers that are there to help serve, and they all have the best focus. They want to do what's right by the seniors. So, if you're in that position where you want to support a senior, take a look around. There are different various healthcare networks. There's centers on aging in almost every town in Georgia. We have an extremely strong network there. But it doesn't take long to find some really good caregivers. And if you're thinking about something other than assisted living for your senior, give me a call. I know I have a lot of contacts and I can maybe steer you in the right direction. But we live in a really good state to support seniors. I just continue to meet fantastic people that serve the seniors, and it's energizing, to say the least.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And to everyone that is watching, be kind and thanks.